especially interested that this may somewhat be affected by the perspective, and it also there need to be the case at least for the true but don't care type of stuff. The other problem that we often had was one tool may report one warning where another tool reports many warnings for the same weakness, and this depends on the paths that you have in code. So sometimes you may report many different paths, and it's not trivial to combine those weaknesses together, those warnings together sometimes. Also, it's hard to say whether those are different warnings or really the same warning. And the tool reports are 6 months old, so tools are progressing rapidly. So here we have a conflict. On the one hand, we would like to have a very careful study of the results. On the other hand, we would like to have a timely study. So once again, I hope you don't miss this point that we want to emphasize not to use our analysis to rate or choose the tools. This was more of a study into how to do such a study than it turned out than to compare the tools. Some areas for improvements, definitely test selection criteria have to be clearer. The evaluation criteria have to be clear and as non-ambiguous as possible. We want to make it a community effort to involve others in this. Also, another thing is the communication with the tool makers. That's really important. We need to give them enough time to analyze the tool reports, because that can help the study a lot, and other things. So communication with tool makers is very important. And I'm asking, we would like to do another study like this in the future, so we want help in planning, choosing test cases, analyzing the tool reports. Finally, I want to thank several people. Bill Pugh had the idea for this, and he also helped with the output format, and he provided valuable critique as we went. SATE is modeled on another NIST study, the NIST text retrieval conference, which is ongoing, has been going on for many years. I want to thank people who did organization and analysis. Romain Gocher did a huge amount of work in all the aspects of this. Paul Black, my other colleagues at the NIST SAMATE project, experts from the MITRE team, especially Steve Christie. And most of all, I would like to thank tool makers for taking the risk in participating in this study. This is not simple. And finally, this is my contact slide. So now questions, please.
Thanks. So I've got a question. At the beginning of the talk, you suggested that using the tools generates vulnerabilities fast. But don't you think that you should consider the validation time when you're thinking about using a tool? Oh, and sort of a follow-up question would be, how long do you think it would have taken you to validate all the tool results, if you had the luxury of all that time?
Steve Christie had a rough estimate that 1 year for 10,000 weaknesses. So we had 48,000 weaknesses. And so, of course, some part could be easily done faster. So I'm not saying that this is 5 years total, but this is a significant amount of work considering that Steve is an expert in this.
So some of the tools generated like 15,000 findings by themselves. So that would be 1.5 years, man years, to evaluate those findings?
there are a lot of things involved here.
One thing that I think was really a big factor was that we were just going based on raw, simplified tool outputs using the XML format. We didn't have the live tool right there. In addition, while there was a lot of work done by Romain and Vadim in building up a database and a web browsing utility, I think the process of finding and tagging duplicates was a little bit slower than it could have been as well. That said, there were some cases where a tool might have reported, a backtrace of, 30 layers deep or something like that, and that could have taken me anywhere from, 15 minutes to an hour or something like that. Another factor, and I think this is just a general factor, is one of the main projects that I worked on was light HTTPD. And as Vadim mentioned, there was this very complex kind of memory management routines that were used all throughout the code. So those generated a huge amount of warnings. It took us some number of hours to really figure out what the routines were doing, how it was that they were working, and then to assess whether or not the tools had even gotten the results correct or not. So there's a good amount of sort of ramp up time that's needed to even understand the application in the first place, which comes into play as a third-party evaluator, but which, the developer themselves wouldn't need that ramp-up time. So there were a few different factors there.
This is also somewhat of a misuse of the tool, this study, because a developer would normally look at the issue and think, should I fix it or not? And we are asking us a little bit different question. Is it a true issue or not? And what is the severity of the issue? So it may be affected by that as well.
Other questions?
So did you conduct a valid attack in order to say it's a true positive? Did you conduct a valid attack in order to say this is a true positive or a false positive?
So he asked if you actually qualified false positive, the results to see if they were false positives or not.
Oh, so what's the methodology to validate whether it's a false positive or true positive? Yeah.
We did not run the test case. We did not produce a test case which shows that, let's say, the system fails in this particular case. So this is just a human review of the issues.
Thanks. I think the first question is, in terms of the selection of why you chose C and Java instead of C++ for either one of them, says a lot about perhaps the direct, well, in terms of like tangible use of the outcome of your study, perhaps. So have you ever, like, this is just perhaps like a suggestion or an idea. What you derive from there would show perhaps the number of, well, perhaps to bring out other than the weaknesses, but also the strengths of each kind of, the specific programming languages that we are perhaps people within the industry would already know. But the thing is the integration of both in terms of deployment when it comes to limited resources, which you, in a way emphasized. So